Welcome or welcome back to the Beyond the Sun podcast. This is a podcast where you can gain insight about leveling up your self-worth, career, and income in a practical and holistic way using an astrological approach by going beyond your sun sign. I'm your host, Nubia. After becoming my own astrologer through completion of a structured year-long course with a professional astrologer and astrology teacher, I applied what I learned to not only level up my own self-worth, but also level up my career and income. I went from making less than $60K a year to making a six-figure income in a career that uses my skills and abilities in a way that seems effortless. As an astrology-centered career consultant, I now use my expertise and wisdom to help others level up their self-worth, career, and income. This week's episode continues the journey through each of the 12 houses of the zodiac. In episode 1, Who Are You?, I shared insights on how we show up and present ourselves to the world, and how that's the most essential part of how we experience life. Because life is a mirror and treats us the way we show up. These are first house principles in astrology. In episode 2, I shared insights on determining what we value and how we value our innate gifts and how that determines our self-worth. And these are second house principles in astrology. If you're following the series, you can see that I'm building on each of the previously shared insights. For example, we can determine how we value our gifts, episode 2 and second house themes, by knowing who we are, first house themes. So I'm building. In episode 2, I also introduced a resource that I highly recommend everyone gain access to. It's a book called Your Infinite Power to Be Rich by Joseph Murphy. I began reading a chapter out of that book, but then I realized that it probably wasn't a good idea. I'm still open to the idea though, so be sure to leave me a comment. Pause right now and leave me a comment letting me know if you're open to the idea. And I will read more of the book based on the feedback I receive. Okay? In episode 3, I may have gotten a little advanced with astrology jargon. And again, astrology is no prerequisite for listening to this podcast. So now that we're in episode 4, I want to reel things back in and simplify some ideas and some concepts. So in this episode, I'm going to share insights on ways to level up based on themes centered on community, early education, family, upbringing, ancestry, and home. If we look at the birth chart or the zodiacal wheel in general, these themes correlate to the 3rd and 4th houses if you want to get a greater understanding of how I'm applying astrological principles to leveling up. So just to tie everything together and offer as a reminder, what I'm doing in this series is examining the parts that make up the sum of who we are in order to focus on leveling up specifically in areas of self-worth, money, and career. So with that, let's get into exploring how our community and our early education, our ancestry, our family values, and so on, affect our self-worth and our self-concept. I imagine that for some listening, this could be a triggering topic from a psychological standpoint, though, and I do have a background in psychology. Much of who we believe we are and what we value, if we think about it, is shaped by our immediate surroundings. our community, our childhood education, the household we grew up in, and those people that we grew up around. By the time we reach adulthood, we will likely need to re-educate ourselves. We'll likely need to take a deep dive on understanding who we are, what we value, and we'll need to make peace with what we experienced in our early education and the education we got from our family. It can be painful, but in the end, it can be liberating. And owning the process by which you learn, as well as choosing the curriculum to re-educate yourself, can be powerful. So, it may or may not be important to you to revisit where you started in order to determine where you're going, but for the sake of looking at ourselves holistically in order to level up in a particular area, doing so has some value. Also, depending on a person's birth chart, for example, like when I'm consulting with a client, there could be indicators or indications that a person has a potential to experience a great level of success by harnessing the energy in the areas of the birth chart that are associated with these themes of communication, early education, home, and family. It's all about consciously choosing to be who you want to be rather than being imprisoned by who you were conditioned to be. And we do that through the process of self-discovery, coaching, and re-education. When it comes to leveling up in the areas of self-worth, income, and career, we may find it just like when we're growing up and we are reliant on our parents for every one of our needs, and then we find ourselves separating, becoming more independent. It's a similar process when we have to level up. And let's think about that. Why do we reflect in horror when we hear ourselves say things that our parents said when we were kids? Like, oh no, I'm turning into my mother, or oh no, I'm turning into my dad. Because we thought that we separated ourselves, right, from them just by being physically away from them, living on our own. So just a heads up, this separation, this growth, this re-education is going to be an ongoing process. And listening to that, you may reflect and realize that by now, that this re-education, this growth is an ongoing process. There are levels to doing the work as long as we're alive. So that's another insight that I'd like to share. So one other thing I'd like to share is we not only probably need to separate physically, but we need to do an ongoing evaluation to make sure that we are influencing our future in a way that will likely produce the outcome we want or something better. And influence is an intentional word that I use because no one can predict the future. Take, for example, investing in the stock market. Being able to predict a crash, for example, in the market has not been achieved. And at the same time, at the time of this recording, a crash is known to be inevitable. Like, everybody knows there will be a crash, but you don't know when it's going to happen. And what's also inevitable is that the market always trends up. So the only thing as an investor that you can do is be the stable one in the times of instability. And that requires discipline. And I use the stock market and investing because it's a metaphor and analogy for leveling up. It requires discipline, and you're investing in yourself. So, a couple other points I'd like to touch on is that consciously creating the life you want, again, requires discipline. So, creating or influencing the life you want requires deliberate focus. And the focus doesn't have to be a chore. I like to use the metaphor of playing an instrument. If we want to perform well, whether for ourselves or an audience, during a recital, for example, our sheer presence requires our focus. We have seen, I'm sure you've seen documentaries of high-level performers. Take Michael Jackson, for example. He focused on making things appear effortless. Isn't that an amazing concept to ponder? I mean, just think about that. Focus doesn't have to be a chore. So adopting the thoughts and actions of the person you see yourself as is required for you to embody in order to make then now and make there here. There being the future, or then being the future. Make then now and make there here. That was a borrowed quote from Neville Goddard, and I invite you to, just like Joseph Murphy, actually they're contemporaries. So I invite you to research these universal laws, and the law of assumption is something that's very powerful. So going back to this topic of consciously creating the life you want, requiring discipline. After we separate and re-educate ourselves, what do? We seek out community. We get nurturing from a family of choice or a coach in order to help us level up. We cannot achieve anything alone. So for me, coaching and community were the two most crucial factors to me leveling up after I decided who I am, house number one, and what I value and how I value myself, level 2, or house number 2. So the community and the family of choice, houses 3 and 4. See how I'm putting this all together? Okay. I hope that this is all coming together, because I find the work of self-discovery very crucial, and astrology just happens to be the tool that I use. So I'd like to leave you with a metaphor. The dodo bird was a bird that lost its ability to fly because it was undisturbed on an island for a number of decades. In essence, the bird devolved and became extinct due to predators introduced by newcomers to the island on which it lived. I offer you the perspective that we need to keep our ability to fly by taking flight, choosing to challenge ourselves, and not stay stagnant in terms of growth. And we do that through help from a coach. We do that through connecting to community. And we do that, we keep our ability to fly through continuous learning. I trust that I've done a good job of explaining universal concepts using an astrological approach, while maintaining that you don't need to know about astrology as a prerequisite to listen and understand the concepts I share. And I hope, moreover, and I trust that this information aids in transformation. Because it's one thing to get information. There's nothing new under the sun, as I've maintained since episode 1, since the debut episode even. My intent is really to share insight that aids in the transformation. And that's just a little bit of what I can do through this podcast. But now I'd like to hear from you. In what ways have you identified and aligned with a community or re-educated yourself in order to level up and possibly help others? Because as the saying goes, famously, you have to put your mask on in the event of cabin pressure change in the airplane before you can help others, right? But let me know, in what ways have you identified and aligned with a community or re-educated yourself in order to level up and then possibly help others? Have you created your own community to be the change you want to see? Let me know in a comment. What other self-discovery tool can you identify besides astrology that is similar or addresses concept in such a holistic way? So looking at the totality of who we are, looking at each part of us in order to focus on looking at the sum of us in order to focus on a part. I'd like to hear from you. Leave me a comment. If you'd like to get in touch with me, to email me, I'll leave my information in the description. I'm very glad that you tuned in. I hope that these insights were helpful. I trust that they were. And I'd like to just leave you with this, that solo DoLo equals solo Dodo. You don't want to be extinct. Get with community. Get with a coach. Get with re-educate yourself. If you'd like to have a coaching session with me, or if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, email me. I'll be glad to get back with you and communicate with you and connect. In the meantime, be well. I'm your host, Nubia, and this has been the Beyond the Sun podcast. Tune in next week where we'll go over having fun, how important it is to have fun in the process of leveling up. Be well. Take care. Talk to you next time.